Welcome to another episode of the Tasmeem Doha podcast in collaboration with VCUarts in Qatar. Um, my name is Mikey Mhenna. Today on the series, we have a long friend of afikra, Wael Morcos, who is a designer and a partner at Morcos Key, Morcos space Key, Key. Wael, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Mike.
I told you I wanted to have you on because I wanted to ask you a very specific question, which is, what is the wrong way to design an Arabic typeface in 2024?
There's a lot of ways that designing fonts and Arabic fonts specifically can go wrong or could be approached in not the ideal way. The first one and the most egregious one to me is if you open an existing font and you just tweak some of the curves and then release it as a new font or a new design. Another way is to stay too attached to the Latin typefaces.
Yeah.
To try to reconstruct Arabic typefaces by just making a puzzle out of cutting bits and pieces of existing Latin typefaces.
Okay.
These are
These are many ways. So,
on the spectrum of oh, don't know, starting wrong.
yeah. Okay. So, a subsequent question that this implies is, how does one even begin to design a typeface, an Arabic typeface? And is it, meaningfully or fundamentally different than designing a Latin-based typeface? You've done both through your firm and over the course of your career. So if you can just kind of, for the people listening and for myself included who aren't designers and are not typographers, help me walk through what that even looks like. A client comes to you and says, "Hey, we want you to design a new typeface for us." What are the first couple questions that you begin to start asking yourself?
There's a lot of questions. First of all, typefaces are software, and there's a lot that we take for granted when it comes to designing typefaces. So people don't always know how to approach them, and so clients as well. They might come with an idea. Oh, it'd be great to design a typeface. So as a designer, it is your duty to handhold them, to ask the right question, to make them understand different parameters that go into it. Because designing a typeface can be a project that can be done in a couple of weeks or many months, depending on the scale of the project. And most probably, if you're devoting your time full-time to drawing it, it can go fast, but it's still more or less a time-consuming project. So the first thing that people need to understand in clients is like, when do you need it by? Does that make sense for the project to make a typeface? Because sometimes clients get excited about designing a typeface, they don't realize how much time it takes. The other thing is, why are we designing the typeface for this project, and how is it going to work within the rest of the design? I've said that so many times, but typefaces are just tools. So they need to fit within an equation or a sort of system of other design elements. Is this a typeface for books? Is it a typeface to be part of an identity? Is it meant to be used for signage? Is it going to be used alongside other typefaces? How does it fit in the system of ingredients that make up a brand? From that question, you can define, well, okay, great. How many weights do we need?
Yeah.
So basically, you start building the brief alongside with them. Sometimes if the client is a type foundry, they more or less understand these things and they come very specific asks. We have this family and we need an Arabic counterpart for it. It comes in these weights. This is how it works. This is how it functions. And this is how we start the conversation. I think we get a lot of requests for fonts that don't end up being actual projects. And that's because when we start asking these questions, the clients realize they've never thought of that far ahead, or they expected that, okay, let's just reach out to them. We want a typeface. It will be done. And then in 2 weeks, it'll be done. And then they realize the complexities of such an endeavor. And they realize that maybe it's better to license existing typefaces on the market already for their time crunch and for their
Yeah.
needs.
How long does it take? I mean, like, give me an example of a typeface that you've designed that, and give me like the sort of phases, the like phase one, conceptualization, phase two. How long do each of these phases take?
So first of all, I need to say that a lot of my Arabic typeface design happens in partnership with Khazak Apelion, who's an amazing graphic designer and type designer and a multi-script specialist. Um, it's hard to answer that question. Why? Because I'm rarely just focusing on one project and one typeface and this one thing. Otherwise, it can go much faster. Most of the time, I'm also running the studio, my studio, Morcos Key, which is a graphic design studio. So I'm usually multitasking on several projects. It also depends who's on my team and how many people are working on this project.
Yeah.
But generally, let's say drawing one master, yani one weight, the full thing with comprehensive set of ligature, a basic language support for Arabic, Urdu, and Kurdish, and Persian, which is what we usually recommend to be included. Just one weight could be, I would say, full times, like focus on it. A month or two is a starting base. But as you know, sometimes we're developing a family, and the way we draw a family is we draw what we call the master weights or the poles. So two typefaces that represent a certain character drawn together, which will allow us to interpolate in between them.
Yeah. So talk to me about those different phases.
It's pretty straightforward. I think the first phase is usually kind of a design exploration of the idea of the typeface. So we use some sort of a test word to allow us to play around and quickly test different variation on it. We tend to go with what is allegedly one of the longest words in Arabic, afas taskayna kumuha. But it gives us a set of like control characters, more or less, like an alif, a couple of loops with a cough, the wows. You get the scenes in the middle, and the nebiras, and you get a special ha, which is always fun to kind of be inventive a little bit with it. So you gotta test a little bit the system and how it connects. And if the family we're designing contains multiple poles and weights and variation between text or display, that is also the time to kind of quickly test all of these parameters. So that is the first presentation. We show these different results for that one word and the potential and the variations and how these might influence. So once we have these letters, we can start typesetting sentences, but they rarely mean anything. It's just like different combination of these letters. And with the client, we just recommend what we think is going to work best for what they need. And once we have that, we generally have a design direction that we can move forward with.
In terms of,
that's usually like the first big presentation or the first checkpoint.
In terms of establishing the different weights, like the second part, and just like refining and finalizing and all the work that goes into making sure that it's a tool that's like multifunctional and can actually work in all the different formats that are needed and sort of functions that are needed. Where in that process do you think you used to go wrong that now you're like, oh, now I understand where I used to make mistakes? Or where do clients like push you that maybe you're like, this is a mistake and let me explain to you why?
I think sometimes clients come from a perspective that is not like Arabic first, and they design a system in their head that wouldn't necessarily work for Arabic. It happens a lot actually, sometimes in branding or logos when we're working with other agencies, sometimes, which our studio does a lot, that not non-native Arabic speaker, they tend to suggest things and build mood boards and have ideas of mixing things in a way that is beautiful and makes total sense for a Latin script because of all the history and all the disconnectedness of its letter, etc. But it doesn't translate as much to Arabic. If they trust us and if the process is open and welcoming for our opinion, then we can steer them into the right direction. Okay, you guys are trying to think that way because you want to achieve this A, B, and C. these ideas in Arabic can appear or can be translated in this way. So let's therefore try to do that. For example, I was recently working with Nike, and one of their tagline combined different type of scripts together, a serif and a sans, and the expectation sometimes is that that can easily be translated to Arabic. But then we had to take them through the idea that Arabic comes in different styles, between geometric and fluid, and that one way to create that interesting mix or that contrast is to consider things that are based in Kufi versus things that are based in other fluid script. And perhaps a combination of a Kufi and, let's say, Nastaliq or Thuluth is a way to mix this serif and sans. So sometimes the client would come with a brief and be built from a serif, sans serif perspective.
Yeah.
That we kind of raise a red flag. However, sometimes that brief, because it's unexpected, it might be an interesting opportunity. Like if they come and they want to design a monospace Arabic, which is not an Arabic concept, but we don't shy away from these immediately. We don't just like raise our hand like it can't be done, it's not Arabic. I think it's interesting for us to try to see how we can do it properly and surprise ourselves with our results, and go that way.
Yeah, I mean, I like that idea of like pushing back on the phrase like it's not Arabic, and like allowing sort of the imagination to take hold and to like approach creative problems with creative solutions and say like, okay, well, how could we do this in theory? When you think about your career, have you seen an evolution in terms of what clients and what the sort of the market are interested in terms of new typefaces and typography in general? Let's specifically like think of brands who want Arabic adaptations or Arabic original fonts or logos or treatments or however. Have you seen sort of an evolution or changes over the course of your career?
I don't know if there are specific trends in terms of style that people are asking for. I think Arabic typography, it's still young and developing. It's definitely much more mature than it was 15 years ago. And I think that is not necessarily because of the clients at first. It's because of a young generation of designers that are excited and invested in creating Arabic typography that is new. So I think there's a lot more knowledge from these young designers. The clients, however, I think are realizing that when they see a successful graphic design project and successful branding that center Arabic and put forward an Arabic mark and a strong Arabic visual system, they realize that it can be done, that there is a proper way that we can approach this without just giving up on our language and thinking that it has to be fully in the international style for it to resonate. And I think people will start to understand that at the end of the day, this is visual communication. Yeah, the people, if they don't see themselves immediately in the message, that it doesn't feel like it's coming from their community, they're going to feel like an outsider talking to them.
Yeah.
So I think the change I felt is that there's more appreciation for Arabic in graphic design. There's more appreciation for potential for messaging and branding and books to kind of be welcoming and playful for new forms of Arabic typography.
Do you feel like we're going through this like almost like maximalistic, overly playful, maybe like overly precious phase when it comes to Arabic, compared to maybe where we were like 10 years ago? Or
well, I mean, design trends like always kind of go back and forth. So things repeat and it's a cyclical. So you're bound to see same things coming again. What's exciting is this explosion. People are bringing in new things. People are thirsty and designers are excited to try new things.
Yeah.
Many of them tend to also respond to trends in Latin typography, and that's totally fine as long as we can find our voice through that. Maybe in a way, because now we have social media. Now everybody's posting what they're doing, and a lot of people are doing great things. So maybe that's why we see a lot of expressive Arabic typography in all sort of ways and forms, and animate and 3D and texture and flat, and new typefaces and new type designers. So there is a lot happening, but that is exciting. That's how we build a healthier design discourse, when we can start seeing, and when peers start collaborating, evaluating each other, referencing each other, critiquing each other, but in a constructive way. I think that is much needed in a way.
I was on Instagram this morning posting on stories, and I noticed that all of a sudden on my stories, there's like 9 possible fonts for like typing, or like 10 possible typefaces for typing, whereas there used to be like 4. And at one point there only used to be 1, right? And it occurred to me that I don't know what those 10 are in Arabic. And even further, I don't know who makes these.
That's a great question. I think all these big tech companies, depending on how important their mandate to reach people in their native language is internally, they might or might not have set up internal departments to do some sort of localization, as they call it, to their products, to their services. So, for example, they might have an internal department that will invest in developing fonts that they are just owned by the company itself. Like, I'm talking about the Instagram, the Twitter, the Facebook, the Apples, the Ubers of the world. And depending on how much they care about design and typography, the more they care, the more the bigger the departments are. So these departments will either hire native speakers to design these fonts that they will then test on the apps. They might do them internally and then hire outside consultants. They might commission type foundries to kind of help them develop. So it kind of trickles down eventually to type designers all over the world, through the tech company, the interior department, consultants, or foundries that then might hire consultants or designers. That eventually it's people. It's people, it's designers that draw these fonts, that draw these letters. But the mandate has to come from the top, basically, that the brand needs to understand that their product is more powerful if it connects and resonates with local communities, and therefore they can create and feel they're part of the experience of using the app.
Yeah. I mean, I was, like how Comic Sans is like the butt of people's jokes when it comes to Latin fonts, typefaces. Is there an Arabic Comic Sans?
I don't think there's an Arabic Comic Sans. Like a font that's the butt of the joke.
Yeah, like it's
in
like
a way,
eye rolly, like super unsophisticated. Like, come on, really? You're gonna use this one to type up your report, or you're gonna use this one in the name of the decane? You're gonna use this one for your business card?
I don't know if I can name a specific typeface, but it's probably the most default thing that would come up when you load a Microsoft Word. And it's probably one of the family of these very crude mustari, which is that nasr that like a very flat baseline. It is a beautiful style. It has a very interesting history, and there are now much more sophisticated versions of it. But I think, or these other extremely geometric fonts that kind of like just build on a Kufi skeleton, but just dress it with just like round edges somewhere. Whereas you have all the nebulas, all the scenes, they are exactly the same height and width and rhythm. So if you have a word that just looks like a stem bar with just like vertical stems, and it's extremely simplistic. We saw it a lot in advertising. I think it was it's changing now that people are understanding that are more sophisticated, easier to read, more expressive fonts. But it also comes from the lack of technology. People had to simplify things to kind of make the letters fit into a font file that didn't support as many
Yeah.
glyphs as we wanted.
So I want to talk about those technologies.
So that resulted. Yeah.
No, finish your thought. So that resulted.
That resulted in a lot of very crude fonts that were the only thing accessible. But if I do see them used now, I would have that attitude that you described, which is like, oh, you couldn't find anything better than this to use.
Yeah.
We're past that. It's been 10 years that we've been doing different things and much more robust and exciting things than these basic fonts.
Yeah. I want to talk about those technologies. So like what technology are you talking about? Like walk me through that a little bit. Like what is the new technological developments that have happened? When did they happen? Are they just part of sort of like new operating systems? Are they related to HTML, CSS, JavaScript? Like, is it just more computing power? Like, what is it exactly?
So first of all, it's important to clarify and differentiate a font designer from a font technologist. I'm a type designer. I'm a font designer. My expertise in drawing the fonts and making sure they work and within the design concept and the drawing metrics that we need. A type designer would usually work with a font technologist to make sure that the font is exported and mastered according to several formats that would work on multiple platforms. So it can get technical really quick. And I personally, I'm not the expert to name all these detail and ins and outs of technology. You need a scripting knowledge. You need a technologist knowledge. But if we go back to the history, from the moving printing, printing with moving letters, which was always designed and considered for a detached alphabet. Arabic was always an afterthought to the keyboards of a typewriter, to the keyboards that we use now. It is only finally that we have smart fonts or technology that can embed the code that allow all the substitution for the letters to happen. So that even with a keyboard that has a limited set of keys, the font can do much more in substituting letters. For example, at a certain point, the TrueType font, the TTF, was a technology that did not allow enough number of glyphs to be in.
What is a glyph?
They're very limited.
So people who don't know.
Shapes.
Okay.
A glyph is a shape of a letter. So a font is a software that has a lot of shapes embedded in it. Right? And so the font also has a set of instructions. So if I write this letter and it's followed by this letter, substitute this form by the medial. If I write if I have a space and then B, and that's it, the instruction embedded in the font file will input to your screen the isolated form of the B on its own. If I type multiple B's, the font instruction will tell it the medial one use this shape, the final one use this shape. When these two letters come after each other, place them with this ligature. So this is all font technology that is embedded in the font itself. So that is what we evolve and change and become much more robust in the last 15 years. So we can create ligatures, we can create different things. Other things, for example, when you talk about like who are these people defining these technologies? Again, it's tech companies that are developing tools to further their products, but they all again start testing them and iterating on them and develop them from their own markets, which is the English-speaking market. For example, a lot of the user interfaces allow a certain height for letters to exist in an app, or on a website, or in a UI setting. Arabic sometimes has an alif that has a hamza, that has a fatha, that might have even a shaddi. So we have a lot of vertical stacking above and below the baseline. We have ha that go much lower and then a kasra under. So this vertical variation that happens in the Arabic script is not accounted for when decisions were made for how long the vertical metrics are going to allow the letters to exist. That's why a lot of times on the apps, on the Instagram, for example, where you mentioned about typing in Arabic, you'll see that a lot of the letters might get on top of on the bottom. So this is the kind of things that are always kind of like, okay, let's develop a product quickly. Let's get it on the market quickly. Let's get these investors to pump more money into our company. Let's evolve it. Let's get product 2.0. But then nobody takes the time to think, wait, on the other scripts are not particularly successful within that context. Once the company is powerful and has enough resources and realizes that it's important for them to expand to other markets, sometimes they will start investing in these and paying attention to it. For example, so as type designers, sometimes we're working in reaction to those. So for example, a lot of times when we have a client that requires the font to be used on interfaces, once we finish the main design, we make a version of it that is what we call a UI or user interface design, where we would go and make adjustments to these vertical metrics above and beyond below the letters to just move things around to make sure there's the minimum disturbance or distortion within these metrics. So for example, the ha, instead of positioning the cas above it, we push it right next to it. This is a compromise, but it also does make sense for Arabic because in the history of calligraphy, the positioning of the marks is a little bit fluid and open for a calligrapher to just make a visual composition of where the marks need to be. So there's a little bit of room to move them around to play with. This is just one example where technology is limiting and then Arabic has to adapt, and then it affects the design and then the shape of the letters, which are eventually changed and modified through time. So typography is the form of our language, right? We're now talking its sounds, and typography is the visual form of it. But the form is always going to be communicated either on material. It's carved on stone, it's printed on paper, or it's housed in digital font files. So the more, even like the fonts with like very thin strokes and higher contrast were developed when the paper technology that people had to print on became smooth and allowed that detail to appear. Similarly, when the font technology is more advanced, the font design or the shape of letters will respond to that technology. There's always this kind of relationship between the shape of the letter and the technology that preserves it and communicates.
Do you feel limited by the fact that so oftentimes people want Arabic to resemble what it looked like on paper? Do you ever feel like that's a limiting factor? That as if you're writing with some bamboo pen still, whereas you're most likely typing on TikTok?
In a way, yes, because it's harder. It's harder to still emulate a complete human hand with technology. We do have AI, we do have vacuum cleaner robots, but we still are not unable to reproduce the complexity of the brain. And similarly, there's so much nuance that goes into handwriting, and putting the effort to produce that nuance in a font is a lot of effort and a lot of variation, a lot of humanness to the font. Part of what makes typography easy and simple is that it's trying to make a system of things and take the arbitrary variation of the shape of the letters. So the more you want to emulate the human nature, the more complex things can become, and the more harder to reproduce they are. But that said, there's still a lot of places in the world, and in Pakistan, for example, where Urdu is prevalent, where people are much more comfortable reading that type of writing that resembles still the nostalgic of the handwriting. So technology will benefit from approaching fonts from that way so that people can feel comfortable reading it.
Was there a moment in your life where you kind of fell in love with some Arabic typeface or Arabic font or the system, not just the way it looked? Was there a moment in time you're like, oh my God, somebody created this file that allows me to make these shapes on a screen? This is insane.
I think the contributions of Nasri Khattar are still like mind-blowing and mind-boggling, and that initiative and how radical it was.
So tell us about it. Tell us who Nasri Khattar was.
Oh, right. Nasri Khattar was an Arab American or Lebanese American architect who studied in the US, who got interested in the shape of letters and their form. There's a great book about his life published by Khat Foundation, written by Namour 40, and it's a must-have. So the story that I remember is that he came back to Lebanon, I don't know where, 60s, 1960s or 70s or something like that. He was giving, or anyway, he was giving a lecture at American University of Beirut, and he had a slide where it says Ahlan wa Sahlan. And he noticed that he mistyped on the typewriter in Ahlan wa Sahlan. The Ha in Ahlan is the beginning of the word. The Ha in Sahlan is the middle of the word. But then he used the same shape at the beginning. And not a lot of people noticed, and it was very easy to read. And then he realized that perhaps there's a way to simplify the Arabic script. And he dedicated the remainder of his life on researching and reforming and attempting to suggest unified Arabic, whereas every letter has the same shape, whether it's in the beginning, the middle, or the end of the word, or isolated. There was a lot of interest in his research from tech companies like IBM, because to them it meant that it will allow them to sell more typewriters that support Arabic. But I think the most important part of his research, or the most like poignant argument to me, is that when they started developing and doing tests on literacy and legibility and readability, they realized that children who are taught the unified Arabic are learning to read and write faster than children who are taught the traditional Arabic. But people who already knew traditional Arabic, it was obviously harder for them to learn a new system. And who approved a new system? Obviously, the elders in power. So basically, there was a lot of opposition to his ideas. Also, because culturally, a script is connected to our spirituality, to our religion, to who we think of who we are. So people had a lot of resistance to just changing all of that to a script that just born out of nowhere. So while there was a lot of effort and investment in his effort, and books published and the classes given and fonts designed within the unified Arabic system, it eventually did not catch on as a reform project that touched onto the whole of the Arab world. But still, his attempts and designing these fonts is pretty remarkable.
Do you ever feel like you want to continue the project?
I wonder. It keeps coming back to me. But I mean, there have been designers that have been interested in it. I think Pascal Zourbi at 29 Letters revived many of these designs that were published. Some of them are available now. I think it's I don't know if it's catching up. There might be value in giving it a try, seeing what designing unified letters is like.
Yeah. Do you feel like, somebody sent me this message, and when I was talking to them about this project or this interview, and they said, "Oh yeah, build better typefaces to build better products." Because I said I wanted it. I was like, I'm going to interview about how not to design a Arabic typeface and all these different things, and to which they said, "Oh yes, of course, that's awesome. Yeah, we all need to learn how to build better typefaces to be able to build better products or better systems." Do you feel like those two things are connected?
Yeah, yes, absolutely.
So why?
Because
Explain to me why. Why do building better typefaces lead to building better products or experiences? Or
because typefaces are meaningless without content. Typefaces are meaningless without being used. Again, it's a tool. If you just leave it in a drawer and or frame it and look at it, like it's not gonna do much besides just maybe inspire you. If you drew all these beautiful shapes and you just keep them in a font file, great. And we'll print them on a poster, great. But typefaces are the most powerful when they are used, when they typeset messages, when they communicate a story, when they add feeling to a story, when they make something look more precious than it is, more nostalgic than it is, more futuristic than it is, more playful than it is. So they have the ability to permeate the message. So Um, Sometimes you also want them to be as functional and almost invisible, so that you're not stopping to appreciate the design. You're just like getting the information and going through your next move within the
Yeah.
product. So if we talk about digital products in an interface, you want to be drawn in, but then you also want a smooth checkout. Let's say if you're buying something
Yeah.
online, you wanted that tiny button to be readable so you can click it. So, and at the end of the day, even product design is about communicating a story through that feeling of relief or ease, or a moment of imagination, and language and the shape of language is a very powerful tool to do
Yeah.
that.
Okay. Before we wrap up, I want to ask you about what you're going to be doing at Tasmeem this year. The theme is under construction. What are you going to be doing?
I will be giving 2 workshops, and I'll be participating in a panel with Huda Faris and Muaz related to the exhibition that's currently up at VCU, uh, uh, Inner Structure Outer Rhythm. Uh, so I will be giving an Arabic lettering workshop, the details of which will be revealed closer to the date.
Yeah.
And I will be giving a collage and zine making workshop, also the details of which will be revealed. But I'm interested in trying to participants think about messages that they want to design, that they want to see out of the world that they don't usually see, because zine culture in itself is in a way a counter movement where designers, writers, poets, activists were trying to bring something to the world because they felt those ideas were not expressed. So it's a workshop to encourage participants to use collage and images and typography that found in magazines to create something new with it that exists as a collaborative zine that we make during the workshop.
Yeah. So I have a question for you. Let's say there's a student who attends one of these workshops, the zine workshop, okay?
Okay.
Or any workshop. Or let's say
Okay.
somebody applies for a job at your, or applies for an internship, or posts a t-shirt online. Let's say post a t-shirt online, okay? Of some design that they made. And t-shirt number 1 has all this Arabic script from the top of the t-shirt to the bottom, okay? And it is the most beautiful, moving passage you've ever heard, okay? And it's in the Comic Sans font that you described, basically, the Comic Sans-esque Arabic font, okay? Just ugly in your eye, just like, ugh, cringy, okay? But the message is beautiful, okay? The second is the most beautiful font you've ever seen. And you're like, oh my God, this is gorgeous. The system is perfect. It's like exquisite. It makes me so jealous I did not design this font, okay? But the message is completely vapid. Which one would you more likely wear?
The first one, probably. I would wear the first one. I think that at the end of the day, the message is, I want to say, more powerful than the form, because I'm a formalist at heart. I love form, but I'm also not a purist. I understand that sometimes powerful messages can have expected belief form as well, and that is part of our imperfect nature. That is okay. I think a lot of very moving poetry I see sometimes typeset on Instagram are done with fonts that are not the most beautifully drawn, or to be otherwise design wise are like crappy fonts, but the message is still powerful and people reshare it, people connect to them. So I'm not a design purist, I'm not a design elitist. I think actually visual culture is much more complex than that. I would happily wear an endearing or a powerful message with a subpar font than a beautiful, smart beautiful font with just like a meaningless word. But
Yeah.
so that's an interesting way to think about it. Because if you ask me form or function, I would say like, oh my God, I'm a formalist. But that way, put it that way, I realize that no, the message is what matters the most because people are gonna not not everybody's a designer. Everybody can relate to the content of the
Yeah.
message.
You mentioned one design book. Do you have sort of a go-to list of recommendations of you're like, if you really are interested in typography, across the board, Arabic or non-Arabic, like you should check out these books.
This is a great question because also literature around Arabic typography specifically is not very rich, but it's against changing. I would recommend looking at Khat Foundation because they're publishing a lot of amazing book on Arabic. Think the book about Arabic graphic design history by Bahia Shahab, and I'm blanking on the co-author's
Haytham
name,
Nawad.
published within the AUC. Hey, thank you. This is a great reference for our library and a big stepping stone for us to have. Uh, there's a lot of book about Latin typography that can be helpful to like know. There's Ellen Lupton is releasing her 3rd edition, Thinking with Type, and I believe there's gonna be a spread too about Arabic that we helped her put together. We're happy that Arabic is gonna give us a little room and space within that very important book.
Cool.
Yeah, few that come to mind.
Okay, that's great. Well, people can attend your workshops, go to the panel with Huda.
Yes.
And I'm excited that I'm going to be able to see you there too. Wael, thanks so much for doing this. People can find you online at Wael Morcos on everything, and look up Morcos Keys online as well. Wael, so nice having you on.
Thank you for having me. Always a pleasure chatting.